Hi there, this is Erin, and this is part three of my spiritual awakening. And how many parts will there be? I really thought the second part was going to be my final offering. That when I was done and I watched that back, my brain was saying the whole time, "Oh my God, I can't believe you forgot to tell them about this," or that, or what about this whole section of life that was really strange and weird, and maybe someone would want to know about that. So I'm back to kind of fill in some gaps and share some things with you that are, some of these things are very strange, and maybe I'll lose you there, or maybe you'll still want to listen to it. But either way, I've got to get it out. I know there's going to be at least one person out there that's going to resonate with what I'm saying. And if you happened upon this video and you're like, I don't know what she's talking about, I didn't see part one and two, those are on this playlist, Spiritual Awakening Stories. And I really did start with the pre awakening. And then I went into kind of like where the big transition was for me, where my consciousness kind of split and started hearing my inner self and my guides. And I really had a huge vibrational shift up. And it caused so many changes in my life. That was the most transformative time in my life, I would say between 2018 and 2020. But then, we have this constant cycle of death and rebirth and death and rebirth and going through dark nights of the soul. Well, it feels like I've probably been through about 8 to 10 of those, maybe even more if you want to count all the little dips up and down. But this video is really to share with you some of the deeper and stranger things that have been happening with me over time, some of those transitions. And I'm not really going to stick to a firm timeline on this, because one of the first things that I really forgot to tell you about was being called to Sedona, California, or sorry, not California, Arizona. I live in California, Central California, and I felt really called to go and do this big conference, or attend this big conference that was happening called the Cosmic Awakening Conference. And this was either 2018 or 2019. I want to say this was right at the beginning. So it was probably 2018. And my soul bestie sister, Michelle, who came into my life in a stronger and more awakened state at the very beginning, she decided to go to this with me. We were both really interested in two of the speakers that would be there. And we didn't know a lot about anyone else who would be there, but we were like, okay, I feel really excited about this, really guided to go. It was different than anything that we'd ever been to. I had never been on a spiritual retreat of any kind, and I had never really even left home, left my kids here with my husband to go do something for myself. That was very outside of my normal box. And it was highly irregular, and I was going to need to be gone for like 5 days. Caused a lot of tension in my marriage. He had a really hard time understanding why I would need to go and do that. But bought the tickets anyway. We went. That trip blew me open even wider than I could have imagined. So it was called the Cosmic Awakening Conference. And this is in Sedona, where it's just kind of like a spiritual mecca hub. You may know what all about Sedona. Maybe you're sitting in Sedona right now watching this going, oh, of course. But I didn't know anything about it. And I also didn't know how the vibration of Sedona was going to affect my body and energy field. Driving all the way up there, it was a great road trip. My friend Michelle and I were really starting to get into some of the more magical, more metaphysical aspects of our awakenings. And we were so naive. We had a great time, but we started sort of channeling on the way up there. And there were lots of spirits and souls big pockets of souls or spirits that we were encountering all the way along the highway up there. So we did a lot of, I would call it crossover work at the time. We did a lot of what we now call galactic plumbing or cosmic plumbing. But back then we didn't know what we were doing. We just thought, oh, we're clearing, which is really what it is. It's just sort of like clearing the land, clearing the pieces of the grid of Mother Earth that have been damaged or hijacked or otherwise need healing. So we were doing that the whole way up there and not fully understanding all of the messages that we were receiving, but knowing that we were being required to do things with our hands. I mean, I was driving and my other hand was like doing all this stuff. Michelle was like waving her hands all over the place. So we were channeling our higher selves. We now know that. But back then we just thought, well, I guess this is just happening. What's happening? I don't know. So it was very confusing, but also really invigorating and exciting. We get to Sedona. I'm going to fast forward. So we get to Sedona and it's pitch black. It's nighttime. We have driven 10 hours or more to get there. And I was not prepared for the vibration. I didn't know that different areas of the world have different vibrations. The vibration is so high there. I mean, it's a place where there are just tons of energy vortices, and portals. And so we got to the hotel and I could barely stand up. I got out of the car and I almost tipped over. My energy field was not prepared for that. And so we eventually got our luggage. We had to go upstairs. We got our luggage upstairs and I just sort of fell down on the floor and the whole room was spinning. I was sort of spinning and felt like I was rocking on a boat. Ever since then, I have been able to recognize that feeling. When I go to a place where the vibration is different, I really think that Fresno, where I live, probably has a pretty low vibration. We have a lot of, poverty and gang violence, and there's a lot of stuff going on in this place where it can really affect your energy field. And I think my energy field has adjusted to it. But when I went up there, I felt like I was on Mars. I didn't know what was happening to me, all the red rock, and it just felt like another planet. So, yeah, I survived that first night by just laying down. That's all I could do. It felt like I wanted to cling to the floor because I couldn't stop moving or having the sensation of being moved. When I woke up the next day, I was fine. My body had adjusted. My energy field had adjusted. But let me tell you, this happens to me every time I go someplace where the vibration is higher. Even if I drive to the coast from here, that's only a 3-hour drive. And I will feel my energy fields trying to recalibrate themselves to fit the new vibration. That happened to me when I went to Shasta too. And Shasta is another story of a place. It's like a special vortex that is really important for Mother Earth. And they say that these are like Mother Earth's chakras or big meridian points in the body of Gaia or Mother Earth. So I've been called to a few of these places that are close enough for me to drive to, and Shasta is another one of them. So I would say this was the beginning of my experience with doing some kind of grid work. I don't know who's going to connect with that word grid work. Maybe some of us will, but it basically means that I get called to some different places for attunements, activations, to pull in my light from that location and really ground it into my Earth Star chakra, my grids, and then ground it into the earth. So many light workers are called to do this type of grid work, working with the stargates. And there are people who are really called to work with the stargates that are called gatekeepers. And I resonate with all of that. It's like, I know sometimes when I'm working with stargates, particularly the Lionsgate portal is huge for me. And I'm an August 22nd baby. I was born on August 22nd. So Lionsgate portal, being a Leo, I don't know, there's just something about that. Every year since my awakening, Lionsgate portal has become more and more powerful for me. And not just that particular day or week. It's like the whole month leading up to that, the whole month afterwards. I kind of just feel like I am in the zone of transformation, heavy transformation. And I know that that's an important time for a lot of starseed lightworker types. But in particular, I feel really connected to that. I'm going to be on this channel doing some really powerful channelings and light work with you, with my viewers. And I just know that that's something that I'm ready to do. I feel called to it. So we'll be working with the Stargates together with those portals. We will be bringing in some massive energy and transformation codes for ourselves and our whole ancestral lines. Okay, that was a little bit of a okay, that was a tangent. Now, back to Sedona. We went to this conference like new little baby children, knowing nothing really about spirituality or our, galactic encounters. A lot of the people who were there were already like light language speakers, had been connecting with their galactic heritage or angelic heritage for many, many, many years. It was like old hat for them. They were just comfortable in their skin, and we felt like such weirdos, but we also felt like freshmen among the seniors in a way, even though we were older. I mean, both of us were in our 40s, but we felt very out of our league. So our egos were feeling very triggered and insecure the whole time we were there. However, there were some speakers there that I could never have been ready for. Sandra Walter was one of them. She has been, a mentor and ascension guide for me ever since then. She's even come to me in my dreams and sleep states to talk to me. And I think I discussed that in one of my previous videos. I feel like she is kind of a guide for me and for many. I also had an encounter with, I'm going to talk about two big things that happened to me in Sedona. I had a big encounter with a tree spirit for the first time in my life. And I had an encounter with a crystal skull. And you might now think, if you didn't think I was strange before, now you will. Because now I have one of my own, and this is Hermes. And I will talk about him. He has a crack now. I set him on a fence, and my fat cat Doug jumped on the fence, and Hermes went over and cracked in half. But that was after I had already spent a couple of years with him, and he served a massive purpose for me. And I will talk about that in just a little bit, of what crystal skulls have done for me since my big encounter. I also have some baby ones. I have been the keeper or the owner of, about 8 crystal skulls, and most of them have moved on, or I have gifted them to the person that they wanted to go with. But let me talk about my crystal skull experience real quick, just so that you have some background. There was, as a guest speaker in Sedona at the Cosmic Awakening Conference, there was a couple who are crystal skull keepers. Now, crystal skulls are like an ancient spiritual technology. They have been around for as long as we have any kind of history to tell us that these are, ancient crystalline codexes. And anyway, you can get a book on that if you want. But I didn't know anything about crystal skulls. In fact, I thought, oh, that is really creepy. I would not want to touch one of those. And it seems a little bit evil and a little bit weird. So that was my reaction. And I didn't think, not even for 1 second, that I would be interested in that speaker. But the speaker's name, I believe, okay, I will correct it and put it on the screen if I'm wrong. I think his name was Lionheart. And he spoke about becoming the keeper of a crystal skull. There are several that they're the keepers of, but one of the main ones that they had on display for people to interact with and to look at was called the Professor. And so he talked about that, and he talked about that journey of connecting with these skulls and the ancient knowledge that they possessed, and also the interaction with the being or the consciousness that was coming through the crystal skull. And the whole time I'm in the audience just like, what? What? So, it just didn't resonate with me at that moment. But I was, politely listening. I was somewhat tuned in. So, fast forward to sort of a break. I think we maybe broke for lunch or something, and all these vendors are out there, and the people, the speakers are out and about. And, they had a table set up, the Crystal Skull Keepers. They're wandering around, and I'm wandering around, and this was probably a few months after I had become clairaudient and had my big clairaudient opening. So I was clairaudient, but I had previously only ever channeled my own guide. And so I didn't think that it extended beyond my own guidance. And I'm walking by this table, and the people, the couple, the skull keepers, who were beaming, they were smiling at me, and I thought, oh man, I bet they're going to try to talk to me. And I'm kind of a shy person out in public, so I don't really like talking to people. So I think I just kind of did a little smile and wave, but there was just something about that table full of crystal skulls that I just could not ignore. So my eyes moved over to them, and right away the woman said, "Hi, do you want to hold one of these guys? Would you like to touch them or interact with them?" And I just was like, no. Deep down inside, I was like, I cannot touch one of those things. No. But she was so open and warm. And so she pulled me in, and we kind of started looking at these. And right away, this, quartz crystal one really stood out to me. And she said, "That's the professor." And she asked me if I wanted to go spend some time with him outside, like hold him and actually take him outside. There was a big deck area. And I guess I just kind of felt pressured into it. I don't know, but something made me take him outside, and she just was beaming at me the whole time. So I got him into my hands, and within seconds, I started hearing a British male voice in my head. And I didn't believe it. And I was like, nope, you're imagining that. Nope, nope. And before I even had completely gotten him outside, he was already starting to talk to me. I could not believe it. I thought for sure that I was imagining things. But, sometimes you can check in with yourself. And if you think you're imagining something, you just stay with it for a while and see what it turns into. So that's what I did. I didn't really have a choice, because this was being streamed in, like my clairaudient experience with my opening and my own guides. When they want to stream in, they just do. And I don't really have a way of blocking that. And I didn't have a way of blocking him. He was very clear. He came with his own personality. Like I said, it was a British accent. And I could not have just imagined that. So as we're walking outside, he started asking me how I was feeling. And I shared with you that I was feeling very insecure, very uncomfortable in myself, very uncomfortable with my own, self-critic and my thoughts. And so I sat with this crystal skull sort of in my lap, and a photographer came and took a picture of me. I guess he was a photographer for the event. And I felt a little embarrassed. So I went to another chair, and I just kind of got into a corner with the professor, and he started counseling me. I mean, it was like he was a little British counselor. And he was talking about my feelings and how I was feeling that way, and it was okay that I felt that way. Gosh, I'm going to cry even thinking about it. It was so sweet. It was just sweet and loving. And so it wasn't weird at all. That was probably the best introduction to crystal skulls that I could have gotten, because it was the exact opposite of what kind of a voice or what kind of a presence I would have thought would come through a crystal skull. I mean, skulls just in our culture, they're a little bit creepy, So yeah, I could have stayed there with him all day. I could have stolen him. I would have liked to have stolen him. No way would I have done that. So I eventually did bring the professor back to his owners, and that changed my mind forever. And ever since then, I have been really tuned in to crystal skulls. I mean, I went to a couple of crystal shops that had them and was introduced to them from my friend Candace, who had quite a few at her crystal shop. And there was one that I really bonded with who called himself Hermes. And I formed a relationship with Hermes. I looked forward to coming to the crystal shop and holding Hermes, because as soon as I would hold him, my whole body would feel warm and light, and I would feel happy. And I would look into the little face of this crystal skull, and it would just stream in the kindest conversation, really helping me get down into how I was feeling, what I was feeling, and feeling like that being knew me. What I didn't really understand at the time was that my friend Candace and I had very different feelings about what was coming through that particular crystal skull. And the one that she had in her shop, she told me had a very feisty, almost rude and judgy personality. But whenever I would hold him, I would get nothing but like a big warm hug type of personality. And I wanted to keep him. I didn't have enough money to buy Hermes from her. And what she was asking for him was just way out of my league. So I started asking Hermes, how do I get you without having to take this crystal skull with me? And he told me that his consciousness would come through in a crystal skull for me. And I didn't understand it at the time, but that was because Hermes is an aspect of me. And I have access to him all the time because he's one of my guides. One of my guides. So that's why Candace was getting a different personality from the crystal skull, and I was getting Hermes, because no matter who you are, when you interact with that type of spiritual technology, and somehow the carving of a human skull contains, I don't know if it's a blueprint or a template for funneling consciousness into the physical so that we can understand it in our human mind. But that's what I'm getting from this. And I haven't read that really in any crystal skull books, but that's just what I'm telling you I believe is going on. Because depending on the stone and depending on the crystal skull itself, I'll get different aspects of my guides. I have one, oh gosh, I left him outside, but I have one that almost exclusively channels in for me a very Merlin-like energy. And he actually shows up in my consciousness as an old wizard. So I do believe that this is, a spiritual technology that we just haven't really connected with. Most of us haven't connected with because we think it's too strange, too occult. But there was a time in the past when people knew that this was one of the ways that you could really amplify a certain aspect of your consciousness right here on Earth. And for some of those crystal skull keepers that are the keeper of a skull with a certain aspect of consciousness. Now, I don't believe that the professor was an aspect of me necessarily, but he's a big enough consciousness that is connected to all of us who connect to him or it or them or whatever that is, that it's accessible to everyone. And it's very well established as that particular energy or consciousness. But what I have done, and now this has become a video on crystal skulls, but I'll tell you really quick that what I have done is I've bought crystal skulls on eBay, brought them home, did a full cleansing on them. There's many ways that you can do that. You can look up how to cleanse crystals. And then I invite with intention an aspect of my higher consciousness, a benevolent, loving guide who would like to really connect with me and help me for this phase of my life, for this part of my expansion, and invite that to come in and embody and allow this to be a conduit to help amplify that frequency. What ended up happening between me and Hermes is that at one point I had embodied enough of that frequency within my own self, within my own human circuitry, that I carried it within myself, and I no longer needed him. I didn't need to put my hands on him anymore. I didn't need to use this physical amplification object anymore. Now, his consciousness still comes through in an amplified way when I do that. However, I have enough of this in myself to access it now completely, fully on my own. So this was a little bit like a crutch for me. And that's why I don't have as many crystal skulls around me anymore, because I don't need them as much anymore. Though when I would like to amplify that aspect of my consciousness, like Hermes is a messenger and really helped me, connect with my intuitive senses and bring through and channel, like really helping me channel. But also the jade nephrite of the crystal here is a grounding crystal. It really helps your kidneys. It helps process fear. So those two things combined were really important for me. So I believe that when you are bringing a crystal skull into your collection, you consider the crystal itself and those properties, and you also consider the consciousness that you want to bring into it. And I actually programmed this crystal skull to help me sleep soundly and have really deep, good dream work for 2 years. And I became a little bit dependent on it. And that was the point where he fell and cracked. I think that was a message from my guides of, you don't need that crutch anymore. You have that inside of yourself. I really don't know how this all became. My crystal skull encounters have become a big part of this video, but maybe someone needs to hear that message. And if you want to hear any more about crystal skulls and how to work with them, if you're interested in that spiritual technology and how to use it for yourself, let me know in the comments, because honestly, this is a huge passion for me. I've met a lot of other people, even in the small town that I live in. This is not the spiritual Mecca by any means. And there are quite a few people, even in this little town, that I have found that feel very enthusiastic about using this spiritual technology for themselves and are really into it and have gotten so much joy and expansion out of that. So meeting the professor was a huge part of my trip to Sedona, and it's one of the reasons I went there, I believe. Another thing that happened there was Michelle has a cousin there whose name is John, and he guided us through some big energy spots, just kind of out in nature in Sedona. And we went to an area which has definitely been used as a big healing spot. There's even a stone, a flat stone, where the energy is so amplified there that when you lay on it, your entire body is receiving these healing vibrations and you can feel it vibrating your whole body. So we laid on that stone. So we walked around and I was just kind of zoning out, and her cousin is very energy sensitive, and he is like close to being like a wizard in that way. And he noticed an energetic interaction going on between a tree and me. He said, there is a big field of energy going back and forth between you and that tree. And when he said that, I realized that I had been in a trance. I had been standing in the same spot, totally zoned out, totally tranced out for I don't know how long. And I was just staring at this tree. As soon as he said that, I realized that I felt like I was about 5. Like I was having a trance state, sort of being brought into the quantum field where I could access my inner child. And that tree was doing something with my inner child. I still have a picture of that tree. Okay, good thing I brought my Kleenex, because talking about that tree has gotten me pretty emotional. So I went closer to the tree. I walked up to it and I touched it. And I told my friend Michelle, you got to come over here. Within like 10 seconds, both of us were like clinging to this tree and crying. It was the craziest thing. So this tree was doing some kind of a big healing on us. And we both just felt like we were completely in our inner child. And he wouldn't walk up to the tree because I think he knew and he didn't want to cry in front of us. But he said he would come back on another day and have an encounter with that tree. And that was really the first time that I'd had an interaction with a tree like that. I never regarded trees and animals other than my pets. I loved my pets, but I didn't see the world around me. I didn't feel the world around me. I didn't feel the consciousness within it. I didn't feel and understand that everything is alive and has consciousness. Even if it's different than a human consciousness, it is still connected in that divine network, and it is alive with you sharing this life, sharing presence. So that really changed me. And that was a transformative experience that could only have happened with that tree in Sedona. So on the way home from Sedona, we had been triggered for like 4 days straight, and there were a lot of spiritual messages and channeling opportunities for us. We were guided to a graveyard, and I don't even know where that was, to do some clearing work. We were also guided into a Target, and I will never forget this Target. On the way home, which is the Target store, right? We were experiencing sort of a time-space blip. I don't know how to explain it, but the music in one area, 5 steps away from another, was completely different. The vibration was completely different. It was like the world had been split in half. And on one end was this reality. And on one end, if you walked over there, was another reality. And so we stayed in that area of Target, and we kind of walked back and forth, and we could not believe what we were experiencing. But eventually I was like, okay, we're done here. We got to feel that. Now we have to go. And I really felt like we needed to get out of there. So there were some strange experiences on the way back from Sedona. Another one where we did a mass clearing, where there were a bunch of souls, I guess, earthbound souls kind of, or spirits sort of trapped in a certain area. And I'm not sure what happened there, but we were taken really far back into the past and did a lot of clearing work there. That was really the beginning of our cosmic plumbing work, the clearing grid work that we've been doing ever since. And Michelle and I are very dedicated to that. And even though she's very busy and she's a teacher, we make time a couple of times a year to get together to really work with the stargates, to work with our guides, and to bring through big, huge light transmissions that allow us to transmute huge globs of darkness for the whole collective. And it's the part of me that I've grown into. There are aspects of me that I know are working that, like seraphim, dragon, different angelic aspects, and mostly what I'm feeling most of the time are these big galactic aspects of me that have sort of this calling card of like, this is what I do. And I feel like they're working through me in this lifetime to really assist with the ascension and really assist with clearing. That may be why I'm here in Fresno. And Fresno is not, it's not exactly high vibe. And I used to really judge myself for that. I know I live in a low vibe place. It's not as high vibe as Shasta. It's not as high vibe as Sedona. I really love to live at the coast. There's all this egoic stuff that I could say about this, but we are at the gateway of the Sierras, which is this huge mountain range with like Yosemite up there. And I feel that this is where I need to be. There are really important people here that I have worked with and need to work with. And this is where my ancestors in the last few generations have been living. I feel very connected to the land that I'm on now. I only have a little tiny, half acre, but there are some really important trees here. And I've been guided to plant more trees. And trees for me now are like friends. I know that might sound weird, but there are certain bushes and trees that are on this property who like pop into my meditations just to be with me. They're almost like, yeah, they're friends in the same way that each and every one of my animals is my friend. They are my spiritual allies. So I consider myself to be an advanced tree hugger now. And I really do go connect with my trees, and they have brought me so much. There's a lot about trees that I never knew before. They're connecting us to our ancestors. They're connecting us to our galactic heritage. They really are interdimensional beings whose consciousness just works a little differently than ours. But there are a few different tree spirits that I've connected to. There's one in Big Sur. There's one, a couple in Shasta, that one in Sedona. Here and pretty much everywhere I go, the trees that have really ancient spirits attached to them and that are really eager to work with my divine light and with my consciousness, they'll flag themselves. They'll call me over, just like that happened in Sedona. And I really appreciate that. There are different animals that have more advanced consciousness than others as well. And I really feel spirit working through those animals a lot, especially with my property and the work that I've been doing here to sort of reclaim. And I've been called to some really weird places in Fresno as well, including the most haunted house in Fresno that made it on that show, The Dead Files. If you know what that show is, there's like the spiritual medium and they take her to these different super duper haunted places and they do a whole show about it. And, you know, I used to watch that before I was awake and it really scared me, but it also thrilled me. When I embodied with my dragon aspect, I became super interested in these two clients that I had that were husband and wife. And they both told me that they had an incredibly haunted house. And they were both, one of them was a little bit psychic, one of them had some shamanic lineage coming through him. And they were training in Reiki, but they were very, very protective about their home. They felt that they were stewards and like custodians of that part of the land there. And the fact that this home was so incredibly haunted, there had been 2 druids, 2 demonologists, a psychic medium, and then the psychic medium from the Dead Files. I don't know. I think she calls herself a psychic medium. And everybody came through and did clearings on that house, but nobody cleared all of it. And after I met them, I had a huge embodiment with my dragon aspect, came through over a period of months. And all of a sudden, one day I just woke up and I was like, I need to go there. I want to go there. And my ego was fighting with me because I've never wanted to visit haunted houses. Like, I'm not one of those ghost hunter people that thinks that's fun. To me, that's not fun. That's scary. I don't want to be in a home that has creepy haunted things. But I will make a separate episode about what went on in that house when I visited it. I'm going to give you the short summary. My cosmic plumber aspects that come out and want to like grapple with the darkness and things that aren't supposed to be here and basically are not in alignment with the direction that Gaia is going in, you know, raising in frequency to 5D. That kind of stuff that's very deeply entrenched here does not want to leave because it is taking advantage. And so I went in and my team came in and started pulling stuff up by the roots. It was like 5 hours of really intense quantum work, speaking light language the entire time, just walking through the house, finding things. And I would stand in an area and there would be a lot of resistance to me being there. And I would start to feel my energy body being attacked. And then I would pull in Archangel Michael, the dragons. And within 5 seconds of doing that, it was like a sliding glass door had opened, full of light, grabbed whatever it was, yanked it out, and shut it. And then the room was clear. And we did that in several different areas of the house until we got to the place where the pendulum wouldn't even swing. That was supposedly the dead spot that they had been told over and over. Nothing, there's no energy here. Like there's no life force energy But I refused to leave. There was something in me, even though I was scared, and I think I was even shaking the whole time I was there. Something in me refused to leave. It was like deep down, I could not believe that that spot was dead and could not be revived. So I sat there on my butt in this spot with Hermes right next to me. And we sat there and we just called it out. And the owner of the house, I had her come and sit with me. She said, I'm being attacked. I can't come sit right now. And I was like, nope, we're together. We're going to do this. We're not being scared off this spot. And we sat there, and she and I both saw in our vision centers a swirling vortex of dragons just yanking this crap up by the roots. Whatever it was some galactic presence, and it did not want to leave that house. So we just sat there, and I just channeled in light language. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I was supposed to sit there and just be a conduit for whatever. And she was helping at this point. When she got past her fear, we kind of combined our light. And long story short, I ended up leaving, and the owner of the house texted me back a little while later to say the pendulum now swings. And so the life force energy had been restored in that area of the grid. Whatever it was that had taken over that area was now gone. And it may seem like I'm just bragging now about, being a cosmic plumber and helping to do clearings, but I feel happy that all of this was somewhat purposeful in a way, because it was very painful for me to go through all of the shadow work that I needed to go, and the dark night of the souls that I had to go through multiple times in order to embody with this light. A lot of clearing had to be done in my energy system, and is still being done. It's like always constant upgrades, constantly embodying with even higher aspects of self, which is really, if you're watching this video, it's probably the path that we're all on as we are going through our soul's evolution. That's just one of the things that really became apparent in my awakening, in the later stages of my awakening, was that I was being called to do grid work, to do clearing work for our planet, who is really undergoing her own upgrades and transformation and stepping up into that higher vibration. All right. I've talked about the tree hugging. I've talked about the crystal skulls. Let's see what else I didn't want to forget to tell you today. Okay. I did a little video about the Hermit coming in for me. During this time, I started feeling a very strong need for solitude. Not just a couple of hours, like solo trips by myself. And this was really hard on my husband and my family. Not so much my boys. By the time I was really feeling this way, they were 10, going on 11, getting more independent. Mom being gone for an overnight or 2 days, even 3, was not devastating to them. But I don't think my husband had an easy time with it. And he didn't quite understand why I would want to go away and not take him. So I did a couple of trips by myself, and one of them was to Mount Shasta. I really think that the Hermit is that soul archetype that's guiding us inward. And I started to have these longings for just time with myself, without anybody else's energy, without anybody else's influence. I had never had the chance to be alone. I lived by myself for maybe 3 months after my divorce of my first husband, but I was hardly ever alone in that house. And I ended up needing to get a cat because I really couldn't stand to be alone with myself. It was scary for me. So I wasn't the kind of person that always sought solitude. I actually felt like I needed to be around people quite a bit just to feel safe and to feel okay with myself. Maybe it was a distraction. But after about 2019, I couldn't stand to not have solitude. And it all started with me kind of apologizing to people and starting to cancel plans more and more. And like I was overextended and just really craving, like going out to my car by myself to just sit and just be by myself, even if it was for 10 minutes. So it became really apparent to me that my hermit had moved in. I was not open to it. I was really resistant of that because my lifestyle was not set up for it. But the hermit did come, and my solo trip to Mount Shasta was quite an event for me. I had a different crystal skull. I had another crystal skull at the time that was Dragonstone, and he named himself Lazarus, and he had been through a really deep dark night of the soul before I got Lazarus. And when I got him, he named himself Lazarus and then referred me back to the biblical character. And so that name and just the whole vibe of Lazarus was very much about like rebirth, resurrection, kind of leveling up. And I got called to Shasta, and I arranged to, rent a little house for a couple of days, which was really outside of my comfort zone, really outside of anything that I had ever done as an adult, especially as an adult mom. So I stayed in this adorable little house that had like a babbling brook. I don't even know. I think I got it on a cancellation or something. It was the most precious place. It even had a little cat out front that greeted me. And so there were creepy things about the house too. Like I definitely could sense that it was not an empty house, if you know what I mean. There was a spirit of a mailman there that hung out a lot in the basement. And the basement, even though they had tried to make it look cute, it was kind of creepy. It was kind of dank and dark. I mean, it's just a basement. I don't know. I've never lived in a house with a basement. But there's something about basements that's already a little bit creepy. And that could just be what my mind is bringing in. But at night, when I tried to sleep at that little house, I could hear fairies. And I kept the window open because the babbling brook was really loud and I loved having the sound of it. But I was awakened. This is the first time this has ever happened to me, by the way. I was awakened 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night. It was hard enough for me to get to sleep by myself anyway, by laughter. And this was not like human laughter. I don't know if I can do it for you right now. It was kind of like a, but in a much higher pitched voice. And it was almost like I wasn't supposed to hear that. I would wake up and be like, what was that? And then it would hush up really fast. So there were little things laughing and partying, and I could barely sleep. And maybe it was the proximity to that little running water brook. And I believe that's where I lost Lazarus. So I ended up losing my crystal skull, Lazarus. And I think that was because Lazarus kind of guided me to Shasta. And a strange thing happened to me when I visited a crystal shop after hiking up to Panther Meadow. Panther Meadow is an energy vortex, a spiritual energy vortex that really activates a lot of people. So I went up there by myself. I hiked up. I did a big, deep meditation. I mean, you could hear the running water underneath the sod. It was just a magical experience. Came back, and I'm rolling through town, going back to, my little house that I rented. And I stopped at a shop. And I don't know if it's okay on YouTube to like say the name of people or like places. So I'm just going to say the guy. There was a guy at this one crystal shop that I had been guided to, and he basically told me that there was a portal in his shop to Telos, which is, if you know anything about like the Shasta spiritual magic that is supposedly within that mountain or around that mountain. Okay, it does feel like you are going into a magical realm when you drive up the mountain in Shasta. The vibration lifts so quickly. It's unbelievable. So, yes, I completely understand what people are talking about. I mean, it almost felt like I was on another planet. It almost felt like I was in another realm the whole time that I was there. I had to stop and pull over several times on the side of the road just to feel this like ecstasy feeling, to totally bliss out with this energy, the sky. And I was there at a time where there weren't very many tourists, so I almost kind of felt like I had it to myself. When I came, so I'm talking about the crystal shop now that I went into. I told him that I just had that experience. He was in the shop all by himself, and one of my friends had given me a gift certificate to his shop. What he does is he goes and he connects to your etheric higher self, your eternal etheric spirit, and he connects to your heart space, and he goes and finds the crystal that belongs to you. So he came back with this Himalayan quartz crystal and told me that there was an aspect of me living in the bubble nebula that would connect with me and embody with me through that crystal. So I did it. And then I'm wandering around his shop. By the way, he facilitates all of this for you. He facilitated that entire embodiment with the crystal, the heart space thing. He was like having a session with someone. Oh, he asked me why I was there. And I said, I don't know. I got called up here, I think. I said, I just really felt like I needed to be up here, and I needed to be up here by myself. I had gone up there with groups of friends before, but I never felt like I got to actually spend quality time with the mountain and really connect spiritually, because I was around other people and it just felt socially staticky, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's always about the other people. I could never just fully have it be about me. He said, oh, well, you might have an aspect either living in the mountain or on the ships that called you here. And to be honest with you, nothing like that had ever occurred to me. I did feel like it was an important place for me to go to, but I never actually felt like there would be an aspect of me there, maybe in another frequency or another dimension, like living there locationally. I just had no concept of that. So immediately my ears perked up and I'm like, what? So he said, yeah. And there was someone who, I guess he wrote a book about the portals in Mount Shasta, who came into his shop and created a portal to Telos right there in his crystal shop. It was almost like, just this invisible portal. So he told me where to go and stand. And he said, yeah, we'll find out if you have an aspect that wants to connect with you and embody. And once you have them in your heart space, you will be amplified and connected to Shasta forever, and they'll be guiding you. So I'm like, yes, I want to do that. So I go to the portal, and meanwhile, it's so weird because I'm standing there with this Shasta rock, which I should totally show you, but it's not in this room. So all I had to do was get a piece of the mountain, the Shasta rock, and hold it up to my heart space. And then these other people walked into his shop because, it's just like, it's a public place. And he goes, just a second. He walked over there and helped them. They walked around the shop. I pretended to be busy looking at other crystals because how do you explain what you're doing there? He came back and he opened the portal for me, totally facilitated. And he goes, oh, you're not in the mountain. He goes, you're up in the ships. He just knows things. He's like the closest thing to a wizard that I've ever encountered. And if you go there and you get guided to him, I'll have to find out if it's okay for me to just say that. I'll have to put it in the notes somewhere or in the description box. But if you ever do go to Mount Shasta, you've got to go by his shop. You've got to talk to him. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I felt something happening in my heart. And I said, is this normal? I feel like my heart is beating out of my chest. It felt like it was going whoom, 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 whoom. It was almost uncomfortable. And he just goes, yep, that means it's working. So I just stood there with the Shasta rock and my heart going whoom, 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 whoom. And I was a little bit nervous about the whole thing. I didn't really know how to connect to what was happening. I just was trusting that it was happening. And it did. Finally, he said, okay, it's done. And you can start really getting to know that aspect of you, but you've got to go down into your heart. And I do have a tendency to get up in my head a lot. That's one thing I've always struggled with. I used to have a huge left brain and be like super analytical teachery person. And sometimes it's hard to get myself to stop thinking and go down into my heart. But he did mention that I was up here and I needed to come down here. So that was really a huge red flag for me that, in order for me to have a more authentic experience with my true self, I needed to learn how to come down out of my headspace. So I left the crystal shop, drove back to my little spot. It was actually Dunsmuir that I was staying in, which is like 15 minutes away. And as night was closing in, it was really beautiful. And I remember having this feeling all of a sudden, sitting out on the lawn chair by the little brook thing, that all of a sudden I just felt like someone was with me. And I got the tingles all over my whole body. And it was a very large being. And I had previously, maybe 2 weeks earlier, woken up in the middle of the night with the name Oshan. And it was spoken to me in my head, but I also had Oshan in my heart, Oshan. So I wrote it down. And then I proceeded to get all up in my head about what is Oshan? Who is this? Is this a new guide? What is it happening? And I never really got any clear answers until that night, after Panther Meadow at Shasta, after the crystal shop, after putting that Shasta rock up to my heart space, then I knew that Oshan was with me. And that's what it was all about. It was a preparation for embodying with that aspect of self that was up in those ships in Shasta. And it has been a process of embodying with that being, that soul aspect or soul counterpart. And now it's a part of me. I would say, when I'm channeling, I can feel when Oshan is there. Oshan is a feeling of almost like a collective. I know that it's a being. However, that being is so connected to the oneness that it immediately connects me to the oneness, and it gives me a feeling of soul family. And he is a very strong bridge to a lot of other consciousnesses that I've been able to connect to since then, but gives me a really solid sense of being grounded here. Here on earth is where I'm supposed to be. I'm Erin of the earth. And before all of that, I did feel a sense of disconnection, almost like my home is out there somewhere on some star. I'm a star seed, so I don't really belong here. But since my embodiment with Oshan, I feel a much greater connection. And also the fact that he is at Mount Shasta, which that as being one of the major chakras of the earth or energetic vortexes there, that means that I'm connected to that as well now in a much more grounded way. This big mother energy of Shasta. And I think that's where I'm going to end. I do want to talk about beginning to embody with the frequencies of these goddesses and ascended masters and the Council of Light, but I think I'm going to save that for part 4 because I'm looking at the time and this has been about an hour. Once I edit it's going to be a long video. So I will do that in a part 4 and maybe call it goddess training because each one of these goddesses that I've worked with, it kind of started with, Isis came in, Kuan Yin, especially in the last few years, doing inner child work with people through my service work of healing journeys. Kuan Yin has really entered my life as a guiding ascended master. And Hathor, I could talk about that all day. So I will just leave that as a little bit of a teaser for Spiritual Awakening Story Part 4 and share with you a couple of different resources as well that really helped me embody with that divine feminine goddess energy, that divine mother energy that really got me started and helped me ground that into my body, my spirit. Thank you so much for listening. If you listened all the way to the end, leave me a little gold star or something in the comments indicating that you made it all the way through. And I hope that this resonated with you on some level. If it did, give a little thumbs up, subscribe for more. I don't know how many parts to my spiritual awakening stories that I'm going to do, but it's not done. I mean, things are popping into my head even now, and I'm like, I didn't talk about that, but you can't do it all in one day, can you? All right. Well, you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.